Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Welcome to this webinar, Monetization and Loyalty Strategies for Mobile Games. Maybe you are hearing a specific music, and that's because we wanted to be in the mood, and we're playing some of the most iconic video games music so that we're all set, because this is a gaming webinar, and we wanted to be in the mood. So my name is Italo Zunino. I am part of the customer success team here at OneSignal, and I'll be co-hosting this webinar with my colleague Florent. Hi, Florent. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks, Italo. I'm Florent. Nice to meet you, everyone. I'm a customer success manager here at OneSignal. My specialty is our mobile gaming vertical. So I'm very excited today to co-host this webinar with Italo. And we hope that the content we created will really help you to improve your messaging strategies and give you some inspirations. And Italo will now run us through the agenda of today's session.
Yes, exactly. So this is the agenda that we'll have in this webinar. As you can see, we're going to start with some welcoming notes just to for you to understand what's the link between OneSignal and the gaming industry, because there is a very close link that we want to tell you a bit of a nice story with our co-founders that Florent is going to be telling you very soon. The second part of the webinar, we'll be talking about how to increase your players' loyalty, right? So we're gonna understand the funnel of trying to make them these hard-earned like players into making them loyal. And then we're gonna go to the third part of the webinar, and the same funnel is going to be Florent, who is gonna be talking about how to monetize, how to make a return on investment on those hard-earned players. And finally, just to finish this webinar, we're going to end with some minutes of a Q&A session. We invite you to please ask questions whenever you want during this webinar. You can add your questions in the chat of this Zoom call. Please feel free to do it. And if we are not able to answer your questions within this live session, we will answer those questions back after the webinar.
Great. Thanks, Italo. So before we deep dive into the notion of loyalty and monetization, we just wanted to introduce you to OneSignal, who we are, what we do, and how our expertise can help you grow in the competitive space that is the gaming industry. Next slide. Perfect. So first off, I would like to introduce you to George and Long, who are our founders. They both started in the industry with a passion for gaming, and they wanted to bring a solution to companies to allow them to orchestrate all their marketing strategy in one platform. So gaming companies could focus on their development instead of on their development resources to build and enhance their game instead of focusing on their energy on building marketing tools. And that's with this set of mind that we keep enhancing and developing our platform. Today, we hope we can share with you our experience and insights to help you optimize your interactions with your players and create this bond of trust. And so in order to understand the trends and the important topics of today's gaming industry challenges, we want to review first what we've learned last year. As you can see in this slide, the gaming industry is in constant evolution, and its growth sometimes leads to the top of the charts. Companies now have multitudes of ways to reach out to their players: push notification, in-app messages, email, SMS, and so on and so on. So two main challenges clearly emerge this year: a market with that is more competitive than ever, and a sharp increase in user acquisition costs. So the CPU has never been this high. That's why today we wanted to spend some time on two key strategies that will help you absorb the cost of your player acquisition and ensure that you can understand the true value of your messaging strategy. Two simple words: loyalty and monetization. How do you make sure that your players are going to come back playing your games? And once they do, how do you influence them to trigger and make that first purchase with your game and to start enhancing really your true ROI?
Perfect. Thank you for that, Florent. So now we'll be moving to the next part of this webinar, so where we're gonna talk a bit more in depth about different use cases on how to increase your players' loyalty. And we're gonna use a specific feature of OneSignal, that is journeys, as a very good way that you can use in order to achieve this purpose, right? To achieve this objective, that is make your players loyal. So the first use case that we wanted to discuss is onboarding, right? Probably you can have many ideas of how to onboard your users. You can be as creative as you want, and probably you will have better ideas than the ones that we will share today. But we can give you some resources that maybe can resonate with your own use cases. But in the first case, we can see that the objectives in terms of the onboarding are always to inform your users of what the game features that they will find within your app, within your website, or your platform, right? So it's important for them to get informed about what's going on. And in a second place, as a second objective, maybe similar to informing, but slightly different, it's the key component of education in onboarding, right? So if you want your players to be successful, then you need to teach them the important interactive gestures in order for them to be successful, right? So what they will do, how they need to do it in order to be successful, where they need to be. So all of these things need to be communicated from scratch, right? From the very beginning. And we also added a third block with break down your onboarding into bite-sized chunks. As you can see in the image of this slide, there is a yes or no branch, right? Which is part of what I mentioned before, our journeys feature. You can here be able to segment your users depending on their interests, depending on their localization. And I mentioned this because you can start targeting your messages in a much better way, so that the onboarding, that is such a strategic point for your apps, websites, is developed in the best way possible. So the next slide that I wanted to talk is about trials and upgrades, right? So as the name of this webinar suggests, we want to monetize our games, right? So how can we make and convince players, because it's all about that somehow. It's about convincing, about using communication, right? Somehow, in order to convince players who are in a trial period or in a free premium version of your app or your website, into converting them into start pay, right? Or upgrading them. So it might make sense to do this either from scratch, from a very beginning, or there is other ways in which you can try to make the players engage with your games before you actually try to move them into paid accounts, right? This is going to depend completely in each organization, but of course, it's important to take into consideration. And the last point is that experiment. It's important always to have a data-driven approach. A/B testing with OneSignal is a great way in which you can experiment these strategies, and Florent is going to be talking about that very soon as well. So our next point is sales and promotions, right? So we have some great, huge events worldwide, such as Black Friday and Cyber Monday. These are very time-sensitive periods, right? Where we need to start notifying the shoppers about the sales and the limited time promotions that motivate an action on their site, right? This time sensitivity generates some sort of excitement, right? Of anxiety in the players in terms of, especially with those engaged players, in order for them to buy different things, right? So you can set with journeys feature as to like an automated way to send timely follow-up reminders to these users before the promotion ends, right? So you can develop this in different parts of your game, of course, very analyzed in terms of strategically, right? So when are we going to put these sales points? Sorry about that. I clicked in the wrong. Here we are. It's the post action I was looking for. Sorry about that. So post action, yes. So when we talk about post action, we always are going to identify that there are two different post action follow up messages that we can send. It can be either a transactional message or it can be a marketing message, right? Maybe this last one makes much more sense with the purpose of the webinar, that is to have a return on investment, to but even transactional messages help you to make these players loyal, as this part of the webinar mentions, right? So we always, and I once I read a book that mentioned these wow moments of a user experience, right? So these wow moments are a moment of delight, a moment of joy or happiness, of a player within your game, right? So uh, probably you have very identified which moments are these in your specific use cases, right? So maybe a good example here of a post-action follow-up would be to ask for a rating or a review after these wow moments, right? To increase the possibilities of having a very good review, a very good rating in terms of what you're asking. So the next slide that we want to review is events, right? So you might reach a stage in your game, in your industry, in your organization, that you want to start creating or having live events, right? Which could include important details and critical dates. So it's important when these happen that we promote them, right? And we do it in an automated way. So why not do it with OneSignal journeys? So that it's interesting here that sometimes we think of journeys as a very long-term strategy of automated messages. And it's the case, right? For a re-engagement campaign, for onboarding, that could be the case, but also works really well for very specific short-term strategies, such as promoting an event, right? We need to drum up excitement for the event with the announcements and reasons that for a user to attend. How are they going to see value by registering in the event? And as you can see in the slide, the yes or no branch will allow, by segment, will allow you to identify users who have registered, others that haven't, right? And create different strategies in maybe those who are registered, send a follow-up, a post-action message, as we mentioned before. In those who said no, then we start another strategy to try to convince them to register. But that's, of course, super important. And last, not last, actually, is we're going to talk about challenges and contests. So it's important here that we progress, engage users to participate in your contest, right? So you can reveal the exciting new challenges or competitions to players, right? So journeys, again, can be a very, very good resource so that you're not manually sending notifications all the time for users to try to convince them to be part of these challenges or contests. Maybe it's going to be easier with engaged users to make them part of this. But for example, the last point of this slide talks about sending the leaderboard announcements and updates when a ranking change happens in your app, in your game, right? Probably players are able to access whenever they want to this information. But when you start communicating these things to them, I mean, we all want to be the higher as possible in the ranking of the game that we're playing, right? So if you are able to send them these messages, there's going to be a point that these players are going to be waiting for that message to arrive, right? And that is a true engagement that you could have with your users. So definitely something that is recommended and a good use case for journeys as well. And now, lastly, is re-engagement, right? So this can be applied to the gaming industry, but it can be applied to every industry, to be honest. Just because a user or a player is inactive, it doesn't mean that they are no longer interested. So they downloaded the app because of something, right? They signed in because of something. So it's important to have a strategy because you're probably not going to make them all come back, but you could have some significant like significant amount of users that actually come back to your game after being inactive for 3 days, 1 week, a month, 3 months. Well, that's going to be your decision, right? But you need to take the opportunity to communicate the different value propositions that you have. You need to send them incentives maybe to come back, right? Like a discount maybe could be on different features of your app that they can buy, etc. Right? So announce new updates and improvements to give them a reason to come back.
So as Italo suggests, there's a multitude of strategies and use cases that can be applied to retain and develop the loyalty and also the engagement of your customers and your players. So once you've managed to start building this trust, it's very important to know how you can capitalize on this and how to make sure that those hard-earned players, are bringing you money and start help you defining your ROI. So we've seen at the very beginning of the session that the CPU has been increasing in the past few months and years. So it's very crucial for the teams today to ensure that they have ways to apply monetization strategies and unlock the true value of their messaging campaign. So for this next part about monetization, we'll see how to build a successful environment for maximizing your chances of triggering a purchase action from your players. So the very first thing that you need to do is to create the right experience to the player for the player. So the gaming industry has its very own particularity, that other industries might not have. It's the sentiment of belonging and to be part of a community. For example, I'm a player myself, and I love to be able to be challenged by other players and making sure that I can do better than them and beat them and be rewarded by the time I spend on my game. So it's very important to create the right environment for the player to keep their interest high and bring your added value to the table. Playing a game is not enough anymore for the players, and they need a sense of purpose. So why should they play your game more than another one? There are so many games on the market at the moment that to retain your player, you will have to bring that unique experience that pushes them to come back playing your game. So for example, personalization, for one, helps you create this bond and trust. Challenges and contests, as we can see earlier with Italo, allow you to create this kind of community space, community experience. And bringing that extra and unique experience is a first step for you to help your player to get into the right state of mind and encourage them to play your game on the long term. And that's what you want to achieve. So now it's really vital for you to take a step back and think about the content that will support you in your quest of creating the right environment for your players. Creating a sentiment of belonging will take time. And it also takes a lot of time to find the right tone of voice and the right way to interact with your players and find the content that will resonate and engage the most with them. And that's where A/B testing comes into play. Here are a few tips to successfully use A/B testing at your advantage. So first up, something that I always recommend all my customers is to challenge the status quo. It's never easy to go against your instinct, but sometimes and in some cases, this is an exercise that can be highly rewarding for you. So to illustrate this purpose, I'm going to share with you this example of one of my gaming customers who wanted to create a brand new communication strategy to their VIP players. They always assume that colorful and emoji and image-filled notification would perform the best. But just to make sure, they launched an A/B testing campaign to confirm their belief, and turns out their VIP players only reacted better to short and straight to the board push notification. So that's a great example that I like to share, because that really shows you that you should always A/B test to make sure that your assumptions are correct or not. The other thing is you have to stay relevant and remember that your audience will evolve too over time. As humans, we are creator of habits, and it's easy to keep on with the idea of don't fix until it's broken, if it's not broken. But your audience changes as time passes, as I said, and soon your messages will feel less and less relevant to your audience and less appealing to newer players. So older players can also get bored easily if they receive the same push again and again. And that's where A/B testing allows you to safely try new things, see what works, and refresh your overall interaction tone. So this leads to our last tip. Make sure that you create regular A/B testing campaign. Get into the habit of regularly testing or launch at least A/B testing campaigns, because there's a million of things that you can A/B test, and making this part of your strategy routine will come a long way in your overall success. So now that you have started to build a strong basis to your communication strategy by optimizing your content and started to create a sense of community among your players, you will really want to move to the next step, which is increasing your player session, the duration, and how often they come back to your game. Reaching the full potential of your monetization takes time and a lot of steps, and that's why you need to lay out a solid foundation to help you reach your goals. So to do so and to understand your players' behavior, that will be key, because you need to understand what they do to be able to influence that behavior up to the point that it will trigger their first purchase. For example, we'll break down the player's life cycle into 3 behavioral steps that you want to unlock, and we'll call them the 3H: hook, habit, and hobby. Hook is all about your new players, how you manage to retain them from the early stage and make sure that they have incentive to come back playing your game. Habit is more for your casual players who are used to the mechanics of your games and come back on a regular basis because they enjoy your game, and now they've integrated your game to their routine. And finally, the stage that you want to reach is the hobby stage. It's the moment where your player is invested enough in your game to allocate part of his budget to it. And that's where the trigger for the first purchase happens. And we have a sentence that says the first dollars or the first euro or pounds, wherever you are, unlock the budget. Because if your player is comfortable enough with spending money on your game, it will be even easier for them to spend it again. So the first purchase is always the hardest to trigger, but the key to unlock the budget. And of course, in order to trigger that first purchase, you need to apply a messaging strategy that makes sense and drives those in-game purchases. Sorry, I have some difficulty with this word today. But yeah, this is like a few examples that you can do. So you can promote relevant offers, advertise deals, and send holiday special to increase revenue, notify players about available upgrades or expiring trials, increase ad impression and revenue for games that monetize from digital advertising, all the things that we've seen in the loyalty section previously. And a favorite of mine is the in-app channel at OneSignal, because it allows you to extend your reach as you don't need your players' permission to display an in-app message. So we're nearly at the end of our session today, but before we move into our Q&A session, I really would like to do a quick recap of what we've learned today. So monetization and player loyalty are 2 concepts that are going hand in hand. You can't achieve monetization without gaining your players' loyalty, and it takes time to build both. Earning your players' trust is a long game, but a rewarding one. It's important to invest your it's important to invest into your communication strategies to make sure that you send the right message at the right time to the right audience. And triggering the first purchase will always be the hardest one to do, but all the work that you've done along the way to achieve will be worth it. and you'll be able to clearly see your return on investment on those costly acquisition campaigns. We hope this session was helpful, and we'll open the floor now to a few questions that have been posted in the chat. Let's have a look at it. Okay, so opening the chat, and I see here one question that's for you, Italo. How important is onboarding to building user loyalty?
Well, yeah, it's actually a really good question, and it's super important. Is when you talk about onboarding, you need to understand that as the first moment of interaction that you have with your users, with your players, right? So all that we discussed earlier in the slide of onboarding, in terms of what we are informing them, how we are educating our users, the value proposition is well communicated. Also, other things, like the UX UI of the messages that we're sending. Is it appropriate? Is it good? We need to think about every single piece of the onboarding in order to have a solid comeback, right? So I wanted to mention actually a very good option that you have to do onboardings with OneSignal. That is the in-app message carousels. So you mentioned, Florent, that you're a very big fan of in-app messages. I need to say the same. I really love them. And carousels are pretty cool because you can actually have even up to 10 different cards that you can basically swipe up, right? In order to communicate the value proposition, maybe invite your users to opt into your push notifications. You can have like different, ask for their localization, different things in only one block of in-app messages. That is pretty good as a use case for onboarding. Yes, let me check now myself if I can find another question. I'm gonna look for one that is like in terms of monetization so that you can answer it, Florence. Okay. Yes, this one is for you. What are some recommendations for types of A/B testing that can be run, and what kind of results can they drive?
That's an interesting one. I mean, it's a big one because I think there's so much that you can do with A/B testing, so much things that you can test as well. So what I would recommend is really to make sure that you have clear goals and hypotheses, like what kind of results are you trying to achieve? What do you think is going to happen? All those kind of questions that you have to ask yourself before you launch an A/B testing campaign. But then after that, it's really up to you on what you want to kind of test. You could test like subject lines, you could test email layout if you're using email. You can test the different CTA types. You can test, like, for example, the title length, offer promotion, landing pages, perhaps with web push. Like I said, with the example of a previous customer, push with images, push without images, emojis without emojis, something that is quite simple so that you can see really the impact of the results. And like I said before during the presentation, always try to do that like on a regular basis, because you will be able to see the results and the changes in your communication and apply that to optimize your content. So now I'm going to find one for you, Italo. Okay, that one is good. What metrics or performance statistics do you recommend monitoring to understand how user loyalty is improving?
What metrics and performance statistics, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's a great question, actually. And if I think it, there are some metrics in OneSignal that you can actually use to track the loyalty of your users, like, for example, the MAU, that is the monthly active users, or the retention rates, right? They would help you to understand the overall, maybe in a more generic way, like overall, of your users, of your players, how engaged they are, how loyal they are becoming, right? But also, for example, the session duration and the frequency can indicate how engaged and loyal your users are, right? If they're spending more time, if they're having more sessions, then you can start building segments based on that information, and you could name that segments as very loyal players, right? Or something like that. But if you want to go like even further, you can also think about conversion rate. I think conversion rate it's a very a more tangible, concrete number of users who are actually completing a specific action or goal, such as like the most classic example is making a purchase, right? Or they are subscribing to a premium feature. Yes,
Great.
I think we have time for one last question. And I already had mine for you, Florent, here. So it says something like this. Can you share any examples of campaigns or strategies that companies have employed that directly impact user LTV?
Okay. Interesting. I think one of my favorite customer stories that I like to share, obviously I won't disclose the name, but it's a gaming company. What they did is they monetize their games through season pass. So they allow players to buy the season pass to get extra credit on the game, extra personalization, customization of their character, etc., etc. And well, that's kind of linked to A/B test. And I'm sorry if I'm saying that again and again, but I'm a very big advocate of this. But what they did is they had their season pass that was displayed as an in-app at the end of the month to all their players. And the performance was not really working. They didn't triggered a lot of purchases from their players, and they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know if it was something related to the design of the in-app, to maybe the price. So they tried a few things. And one very clever thing that my contact did is that they changed the date of when the in-app was triggered for the player. So it was normally at the very end of the month, but they moved it to the payday of the country that they are, developing the game for.
Yeah.
And that changed everything because, everyone, like even me, when I get my salary, I'm just like, I'm the king of the world and I can spend my money. And that's kind of, the trigger reaction that end up doing for the players because they have disposable income and they see an offer and they're like, well, I can afford it. And then the purchase just like keep going. So that was a funny one that I always like to share.
Nice one. Well, after listening to these questions and the answers, we really want to thank everyone for joining today's live session. I think it's our pleasure with Florent to be here. Those who asked questions but we didn't respond here in the live session, they will get answered. So a OneSignal product expert probably will be getting back to you on your email with your questions with an answer. Okay, but thank you, everyone. Also, you will be receiving a link to the recording of this session. Maybe you want to watch it again because it was super cool. And yeah, well, that's it. I don't know if you have anything else to say, Florent.
No, just like a big thank you. Hopefully this session was helpful, insightful, and we helped you a bit today. Italo and I, that's kind of our goal to make sure that share the love and share the insights that we see in the industry, at other customers as well, other companies. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for your time and thanks for joining.
All right, see ya.
Bye.